suggesting Britain has something to hide by failing to provide samples of the nerve agent Novichok from Moscow to examine. Russia also wants to be allowed to visit Yulia Skripal, whose condition is improving and who may hold vital information in the spy investigation. Lisa Holland, Sky News, Moscow.
Now, in the last couple of hours or so, of course, we've been reacting to that news that Winnie Mandela has died at the age of 81. She, of course, was married to Nelson Mandela for 38 years. She was a campaigner, an activist, she was a politician in her own right. And people are gathering outside our house in Soweto to pay tribute this evening. Let's get more reaction on that now. I'm joined on the phone by the African Union Commission President spokesperson, Eva Kalondo. Very good evening to you, Eva. How do you think Winnie Mandela will be remembered?
First, she definitely the last of the big ones. I think people forget that she was a very young girl, not a year old, 34 years old, when she was thrust into the limelight and into the struggle for liberation in her country. Spanish and tortured. And she really became the human face, and in later years, maybe the celebrant face of the liberation and of the liberation struggle in South Africa. But truly a remarkable woman who paved the way for not only other countries, but also for women. Was a symbol of healing and healing that she was symbolized in the fight against apartheid in South Africa. They don't make people like that.
You say she was a great woman, but she was hugely divisive. Let's not forget that she promoted necklacing, the practice of burning people alive using petrol. She had a lot of people who did not like her, and she was hugely controversial.
Well, let's say that she's different, because we get all saying that she's a person of her time. And if you do remember that time, I'm tired of that time. Brutality on all sides, and to have been the type of person that she was, and that she was able to impose not only on the country but also on the consciousness of the country that literally was fighting for its own life. I think it's really important at this point to understand what it felt like to be in South Africa in 1985. I was probably 13 years old. Nobody knew whether we were going to ever live to see a day that we would live to see liberation, neither of South Africa or Southern Africa, next or in Namibia either. So Winnie Mandela, yes, a celebrate, I thought, but one without which we would have never had the hope to even dare dream that we would have been able to do yesterday, and you can see as well.
How instrumental do you think she was in change in South Africa and in supporting her husband of 38 years, Nelson Mandela?
That's a really hard one. It's almost asking oneself, how would you put yourself into the situation of being a young bride? You have been less married than, you haven't been married more than 2 years. You're not 35 years old yet. You've got 2 young children, Spanish, your husband is in prison, all of your comrades may not see you. You are tortured and put into prison. And for the greater part of your adult life, basically vilified and put forward into a position that maybe may or may not have been part of your life plan. She is a remarkable symbol of what people and women in particular can do when they are put in such a position. And hopefully we'll never have another era like that. But thank God we had a woman like her here.
Okay, Eva Kalondo, thanks ever so much for sharing your thoughts with us tonight. Jeremy Corbyn has admitted that there is genuine concern within Labour about anti-Semitism and pledged that every case brought to the party will be investigated. The opposition leader has insisted this evening that it will not be tolerated in any form after some members voiced their frustration about Labour's response in recent weeks.
There is genuine concern, and we're dealing with that concern. We're dealing with that concern by investigating every case that's brought to our attention, and if the person has committed an anti-Semitic act in any way, then they're suspended and usually expelled from the party as a result of that. We are not tolerating anti-Semitism in any form in the Labour Party.
Let's go live now to Westminster, and our chief political correspondent John Craig is there for us. And John, he has received some support tonight from within his own party.
Very significant move tonight. The left-wing grassroots organisation Momentum has released a fairly detailed statement acknowledging that anti-Semitism is a major problem in the party and it hasn't been dealt with adequately, and it can't just be dismissed as right-wing smears. Now, this is the grassroots group. It's led by a veteran activist, John Landsman, who is in fact Jewish. And they are taking aim really at some of those left-wingers who are saying it's all smears and saying that, look, this problem's got to be grappled with. The Momentum statement says it acknowledges the anger, upset and despair in the Jewish community at the cases of anti-Semitism. The failure to deal with them is in a sufficiently decisive, swift and transparent manner. And it says accusations of anti-Semitism can't be simply dismissed as right-wing smears or conspiracies. It says examples are not just a problem of extreme bad apples, but unconscious bias. It's more widespread in the Labour Party than many of us had understood only a few months ago. And while Momentum says some of Mr Corbyn's critics are trying to use this to undermine him, this does not reduce the need to challenge anti-Semitism. Now, this will help Mr Corbyn as he tries to grapple with this problem. Remember, there was that demonstration a week ago today in Parliament Square. A lot of Labour MPs turned up. A lot of them are now facing attacks from left-wingers in their own constituency parties. So the Momentum intervention will help Mr Corbyn as he tries to deal with it. And of course, the Momentum are clearly trying to say to some of the more extreme left-wingers, look, calm down a bit, let's sort this out. So Mr Corbyn will be pleased with this intervention.
OK, John, thank you. Teachers are warning that the UK is suffering from a child poverty crisis, with an increasing number of pupils arriving at school without clean clothes and showing signs of malnourishment. But the situation has become so desperate in some areas that children have been spotted filling their pockets with food from school dinners to take home with them. Sky's Dan Whitehead has this report.
Ladywood in Birmingham, one of the country's worst areas when it comes to child poverty. At its heart, the base community centre. During term time, it runs breakfast clubs for local children, some of whom may not get enough food at home.
We do have after-school clubs, so we do give them jacket potatoes.
Those behind it say it's clear some children are coming in desperately hungry.
It's poverty. People are in debt, and I think the debt probably came from somewhere before where they got into debt, maybe credit card debts or something like that, and now it's caught up with them. They've got to pay this debt back, and so food gets on the back burner.
Even on Easter Monday, charities such as this offer essential food for families who are struggling.
We get, £100 or £200 a week for 6 children, and to buy light and buy food and buy clothes of that, it won't stretch. So that's where the church come in to help them as a charity.
It's becoming essential though, right?
It is.
Some of the families using this centre didn't want to appear on camera. It's simply a question of pride. In fact, the organisers here say they've even started to deliver these emergency food packages to their houses because they're simply too ashamed to be seen. The National Education Union says more and more teachers are seeing pupils turning up to school hungry. Teachers report children filling their pockets with school dinners and turning up to school in unwashed, dirty clothes.
Increasing numbers of schools have food banks, clothing banks, schools putting in washing machines and showers so that young people can have a shower and have their clothes washed by the school so that they have clean clothes to wear.
A poll of around 900 NEU members found that 87% think that poverty is having a significant impact on learning of their pupils. 60% also say poverty has worsened since 2015. The Department for Education told Sky News it's spending £26 million to kick-start breakfast clubs in 1,700 schools. It's not enough, say many families on the poverty line who are relying on charities to simply get by. Dan Whitehead, Sky News in Birmingham.
Well, let's take a look at some of the day's other stories now. Doctors are warning that the NHS winter crisis will extend into the summer. The British Medical Association is predicting that almost 6.5 million people could attend A&E during the summer months, and 774,000 people could have to wait more than 4 hours to be seen. In Syria, rebels have been evacuating the last opposition stronghold in eastern Ghouta. Buses have arrived to take them from Douma to the northern town of Jarablus. State television has described those evacuating as terrorists and families. It follows a deal announced yesterday allowing them to leave. The death toll following last week's mass protests on the Gaza-Israel border has risen to 18. More than 750 Palestinians were reportedly wounded by Israeli fire in Friday's protest, making it the bloodiest day in Gaza since the 2014 Israel-Hamas war. Israel has rejected allegations of unlawful use of lethal force and says Gaza's militant rulers Hamas were trying to attack its border under the guise of protests. The husband of a British mother being held in prison in Iran has criticised the Foreign Secretary's unsuccessful bids to have her released. Her supporters mark the second anniversary of her arrest. Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe is serving a 5-year jail term for spying, which she's always denied. Lorna Shattuck has this report.
A moment of cheer on a bleak, rainy day in North London that marks 2 years since Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe was detained in Iran. The British-Iranian dual citizen has been sentenced to 5 years in jail on spying charges, but says she was just visiting her parents with her young daughter.
This is a mum and a baby that was on holiday and hadn't done anything. It's just staggering that it can't have been so. The Foreign Office is always quite careful and secretive in what it says. It's never felt like they've really explained what's going on. That's partly why we want to push the really blunt question of what do you think her rights are?
Last December, the Foreign Secretary discussed Nazanin's case with his counterpart in Tehran, raising hopes she'd be home by Christmas, or at least by Iranian New Year, which was earlier in March. But both have been and gone, with no progress.
This time last year, Nazanin's family and supporters gathered at this tree to mark exactly 1 year since her detention. But of course they hoped they wouldn't have to come here again. That's why this year they're asking people to choose laughter, telling jokes and tying them to the tree to keep up their morale, even as Nazanin remains behind bars.
Richard Ratcliffe says his wife is suffering mentally and physically in prison and thinks she may be being held so Iran can persuade Britain to pay an historic debt. Ministers dismiss that, but Mr Ratcliffe wants another meeting with Boris Johnson, while his local MP wants to take the case even higher.
We've had a meeting with the Foreign Secretary. I brought it up at Prime Minister's questions and Nazanin still isn't home. So now I feel I have no choice but to escalate the matter, so I will be asking the Prime Minister to meet with me and with Richard Ratcliffe in the following weeks to see how we get this mother back home in West Hampstead.
The Foreign Office says it continues to approach Nazanin's case and all of our British-Iranian consular cases in a way that we judge is most likely to secure the outcome we all want. Therefore, we will not be providing a running commentary on every twist and turn. But Nazanin's supporters aren't giving up, and the jokes aren't confined to this North London park.
Why doesn't the Queen, our Queen, why does she never wave with this hand? Because it's mine.
That joke and all the others will be collected and sent to Nazanin in prison to cheer her up. But her supporters hope she won't be left hanging on there for much longer. Lorna Shattuck, Sky News.
You're watching Sky News. Coming up, bank holiday misery as snow and heavy rain cause treacherous conditions on the roads. Welcome back. Now, here's something you don't see every day. Donald Trump and his wife Melania have been joined by the Easter Bunny at the start of the annual White House Easter egg roll. A crowd of almost 30,000 people gathered on the South Lawn for the event. And after speaking to the crowd, the president then criticised Democrats for their stance over the so-called dreamer immigrants who are living in the US illegally, having been brought in as children.
The Democrats have really let them down. Really let them down. They had this great opportunity. The Democrats have really let them down. It's a shame. And now people are taking advantage of DACA, and that's a shame. It should have never happened.
Now, one of the busiest travel days of the year has seen snow and torrential rain cause treacherous conditions on many of Britain's roads. The Met Office has issued yellow warnings for rain across Western England, Wales and Northern Ireland, whilst yellow warnings for snow are in place across Northern England and Scotland. Gerard Tubb reports now from Keighley in West Yorkshire.
Easter weekend is usually the first big getaway of the year, but 2018 had other ideas. The winter that keeps coming back did it again, covering large areas of Scotland and Northern England in snow.
That's it, mate. Keep going.
Bank holiday events were left to struggle on. This was the World Coal Carrying Championships in Gawthorpe in West Yorkshire. The morning's children's race was cancelled, but the adults were undaunted. When the weather's bad, tourist attractions suffer. The home of the Brontes, Haworth, high up in the Pennines, was all but deserted. In the Bronte Museum, only a handful of visitors had come through by lunchtime.
Unfortunately, this weekend it's usually one of our busiest, so it's a bit of a washout this time. So we did have quite a busy weekend, but the bank holidays either side, again, quite quiet. Last year we welcomed nearly 90,000 visitors to our museum, and the Easter weekend was one of the peak weekends, if you like, throughout the year. But year to date we are down.
There were some, though, who refused to be put off by the weather.
We knew it was coming, so we've come prepared.
But it's still not very nice for a bank holiday, is it?
No, definitely not, but you make the most of what you've got, don't you? We knew what the weather was going to be like before we left home.
We're coming from Germany, from Stuttgart, and we looked to this morning at the weather forecast, and we see sunny, 15 degrees at Stuttgart at home, and we thought, okay, welcome to England. Welcome to England, thanks a lot.
Where it didn't snow, the chances are it was raining. More than 200 flood alerts were in place from Cornwall to Northumberland, with 24 flood warnings to take immediate action. It is, say the experts, only what we should expect.
It's not uncommon to get snow or really this spring-like wet weather over Easter. It is generally an unsettled month with it being in spring, and really Easter's more likely to get any snow than over the Christmas period. So it's definitely not unlikely to, or not uncommon to get snow or even this longer spell of rain this late.
The only good news is it's getting warmer over the next few days, just in time for most of us to be back at work. Gerard Tubb, Sky News, West Yorkshire.
Well, let's see how the weather's looking for the rest of the week and beyond.
By the springtime flowers of a mountain lake, to the first snowfall on a winter's day.
Well, tomorrow Scotland will remain cold, I'm afraid to say, and pretty windy too, with rain and hill snow. But further south it will be milder and brighter, but there will also be a few scattered showers. This evening, Met Office yellow warnings remain in force for rain and snow across northern England and Scotland. Overnight, most of England, Wales and Ireland will have scattered showers, although those may merge into longer spells of rain across southern parts of the Republic. Rain and hill snow will continue to move northwards across Scotland.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, coming up, we've got more reaction on the death of the anti-apartheid campaigner Winnie Mandela. Let's get more now on our top story and the news that the South African anti-apartheid campaigner Winnie Mandela has died at the age of 81. For many years she was married to Nelson Mandela and she campaigned actively for his release when he was in prison. But she was also a political leader in her own right, holding government roles and being a leading but controversial member of the African National Congress. Well, in Zimbabwe is Fazai Mahiri, advocate of the High Court and Supreme Court of Zimbabwe and lecturer in law at the University of Zimbabwe. Very good evening to you. How do you think Winnie Mandela is going to be remembered? What will be her legacy?
I think her legacy is definitely a complex one. I think what a lot of commentators will agree on is that she's both revered and reviled. I think there's no running away from the fact that she was an icon of the struggle against apartheid and a strong campaigner for black nationalism to the end. But at the same time, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa found her accountable for gross violations of human rights. You know, part of her legacy is tainted by corruption scandals when she was a member of Mandela's cabinet. And so I do think it's going to be a complicated legacy. But I do think that you cannot tell the story of the fight against apartheid in South Africa without remembering, with all due respect, the name Winnie Mandela.
She maintained a lot of grassroots support. How do you account for that?
I think this is easy to account for. A big point of departure between Nelson Mandela and Winnie Mandela was the fact that Nelson Mandela, she felt, had let, white rule go scot-free. She felt that she didn't do enough to fight for the economic emancipation of black people. I think one of the books speaks of how she says that Mandela went into prison a strong revolutionary and came out a rather weak man. And she also despises Desmond Tutu's approach of reconciliation. She really continued to fight for more emancipation, and some people speak of her being the precursor to the current movement in South Africa related to the EFF, the Economic Freedom Fighters. So definitely that would resonate with a lot of grassroots black South Africans who feel disenfranchised, who feel disillusioned by their lack of economic progress, notwithstanding the end of apartheid.
Desmond Tutu has been one of those to pay tribute. He said that she is a defining symbol of the struggle against the apartheid. Do you think that's an accurate description?
I do, absolutely. Winnie Mandela was very vocal in fighting against apartheid, even when her husband was incarcerated. She then communicated a lot of his thoughts to the wider world. So I think Desmond Tutu is absolutely correct. Defining icon, the fact that she was a woman, a very steady hand at the side of Mandela even as he left. I think she was a huge influence. I think, some of his more important struggle years, particularly the time he was in prison, she was extremely, I do think some of that changed to a degree, in post-apartheid South Africa, when their paths differed in as far as how to treat white South Africa, following the end of apartheid. He was more reconciliatory, and she felt that a bit more needed to be done to emancipate black South Africa. So definitely during his prison years, she was extremely important, defining, instrumental for Mandela. But, his later legacy, perhaps she didn't influence him as much.
Okay, Fazai, thanks ever so much for your thoughts from Zimbabwe. Appreciate your time. Now, Syrian government forces have drawn closer to taking full control of eastern Ghouta, with state media reporting that rebel fighters have started to evacuate the former opposition stronghold in Damascus. Well, retaking the suburb would mark a major milestone in President Bashar al-Assad's efforts to retake rebel-held territory. And in South London is Tara McCormack, lecturer in international politics at the University of Leicester. Very good evening to you. Dumasful represents the rebels' worst defeat since 2016. In that context, how significant is this deal?
This is pretty significant. So it's a huge relief for Damascus, because we call these groups rebels, but they are in fact radical extremist jihadi groups such as Jaish al-Islam, who are sponsored funded directly by Saudi Arabia, who have been attacking Damascus for 7 years now. So it is a huge defeat for the jihadi groups. Now there's still a remaining pocket in the west of the country which is held by ISIS, Idlib, and the Syrian government has reached a number of deals with the various jihadi groups who are being bussed either to Idlib or to the north of Turkish Al-Qaeda controlled territory around Afrin, which you will have covered in terms of the Turkish and Al-Qaeda occupation of Afrin. So it is a big deal for the Syrian government.
We were just looking then at some pictures on the screen, some drone footage of the area. We know that towns and cities have been heavily bombarded. What is the situation like on the ground?
Yeah, I mean, there has been an absolutely, fairly brutal attack, I think we would say, by the Syrian government, backed by Russian air power, to essentially remove these radical Islamist jihadi groups from control. So yes, no holds barred, absolutely. But let's remember also that when the coalition forces, including ourselves, last year retook Mosul, Amnesty International and various other bodies say over 40,000 people were killed. So make no mistake that these are brutal situations.
I mean, you said there tens of thousands of people being killed, but what is the impact on citizens there? What kind of thing are they going through on a day-to-day basis?
Well, what has happened, what's been going on actually over the last 4 to 3 weeks has been that these areas in East Ghouta have been evacuated of civilians. So people have had choices about where to go into government-held territory. Some of the radical Islamist fighters and their families, several thousand people, that have been bused to, for example, Idlib, which is currently held by ISIS. So it has been absolutely a terrible experience, of course, for civilians. But I would also like to point out that civilians in East Ghouta have effectively been being held as human shields. The UN has discussed this, effectively been held by human shields by these radical Islamist jihadi groups. So yes, no win for the civilians, I'm afraid.
So why has it taken so long to reach this stage, and where do things go from here?
Well, I think one of the things that has been the case is that, and we don't discuss it so much in the UK media, is that these groups, such as Jaish al-Islam, have been heavily funded by outside powers. And these groups, these states such as Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Turkey, and America, of course, has had a program via the CIA and the Pentagon. These have effectively empowered, of course, funded these groups and kept them fighting. So there is a very big debate to be had about the role of external forces in the Syrian conflict, and we don't really have that enough. However, where we are now in the Syrian conflict, we are leaving one phase in that the Syrian government now has control of about 70% of Syria. But now we are entering in a really, really, actually quite dangerous phase. We've got in the east of Syria, we've got about 30% of the country controlled by Kurdish forces backed by America. Now this 30% contains most of the oil fields. Rex Tillerson, the American Secretary of State, before he was sacked, said that America was going to remain there in order to counter Iran. We'll see how that develops. In the north of the country, we now have a Turkish occupation, Turkey backed by Al-Qaeda, as we know what has just happened in Afrin. We now, in the city of Manif, sorry, I can never say that, we have two NATO forces eye to eye. We have Turkey against American-backed forces. Now this is an extremely tense situation. Turkey has said it is going to go and retake the city. This is not what America wants. So this is really now the place to watch what is going to happen in northern Syria between Turkey and American-backed forces. So this is going to be the next flashpoint. So in one sense, we have one ending. We have one part of the war has ended, in that the Syrian government has taken 70% of Syria back. On the other hand, we now have this kind of very confusing, dangerous situation where we have some kind of key major powers controlling bits of Syria and sort of facing off to each other. The situation in the north between Turkey and America now is going to be an extremely tense one, and we will see how that plays out.
OK, Tara McCormack, thanks for your expertise. Appreciate your time. Now, teachers are warning that the UK is suffering from a child poverty crisis, with an increasing number of pupils arriving at school without clean clothes and showing signs of malnourishment. The situation has become so desperate in some areas that children are spotted filling their pockets with food from school dinners to take home with them. The Shadow Education Secretary, Angela Rayner, is in central London for us. We can speak to her now. Very good evening to you. These reports from teachers that some children have greyish skin, poor teeth, they're malnourished. How is this possible in 21st century Britain?
Well, it's absolutely devastating and damaging report from the Child Action Poverty Group that says 87% of their respondents, who obviously look after our children at schools, have said that children are facing dire consequences, that it's affecting their standard of education and their ability to learn in the classroom. When you've got children filling their pockets with food because they're not able to be fed by their working families, and I must stress that most of these children are in working families, it's a devastating indictment on this government.
You say it's an indictment on the government, but of course there's a Labour government in Wales, and it seems that there's a similar situation there.
Well, the problem is Wales' budget is controlled by central government, and Wales and Scotland have faced budget cuts because the government are prioritising tax cuts to those at the top of the scale instead of actually supporting our children in the classroom. The Labour government the Labour Party at the general election said that we would give free school meals to all primary school children, and we pay for that by ending the tax giveaway to private schools. I think that's the right priority, and when we've got children having to steal food to learn in our classrooms, then we know that things have got really bad. And the government still haven't appointed the chair of their Social Mobility Commission 4 months down the line, which tells you a lot about where their priorities are at the moment.
I'm looking at the list here. The government's saying that it's invested £2.5 billion in breakfast clubs, they've got a social mobility plan. What more can they do to improve the situation?
Well, the government at the last election was called out, in fact, in terms of they was trying to steal school meals from children. And only the other week we had a vote in Parliament where 1 million children who would have been entitled to free school meals, who are on low income, in low-income families, the government changed the rules so that those that would be in receipt of universal credit will no longer be eligible for free school meals. So the government decisions they're making currently is plunging more and more children into poverty, which is a sad indictment for us all, because all children need to do well if the British economy and the British future is going to do well.
What would you say is the advice? Because, of course, parents sending their children to school, they've got, the school lunches, they've got uniforms. What kind of tips can parents take from you to try and save some money?
Well, I think the government should step in, and they had a report out in 2013 as part of the coalition that said that all primary school children should be eligible for free school meals. I think they should implement that. Not only will that help hard-working families of this country, but it'll also end the stigma. I was a free school meals recipient, and I remember that stigma, and I remember waiting, just trying to get to my school dinner at lunchtime and, feeling really hungry in the classroom. The government could do that today and could end that poverty for working parents that need that support, and parents that are trying their best all the time. I say to them, keep going, you're doing a tremendous job. I just wish the government would do what Theresa May promised on the steps of Downing Street and support working families across the UK instead of supporting those tax breaks for the rich at the top who don't need that support.
Is there an argument, though, that schools need to do more themselves? So some schools already have things like food banks, they've got, second-hand uniform shops. Should that be kind of rolled out to more schools to try and help parents who are struggling?
You see, one of the things that we've heard at the National Education Union conference this weekend is that more and more teachers and head teachers are actually washing school uniforms in the school, providing school dinners and supporting parents to help children who are in these situations at the moment. And more children are being put on at-risk registers as well, when really it's about making sure that working families and parents have the support to raise their own children. I was one of those children that needed that support, and I can thank the taxpayers of yesterday that supported me when I needed it, and I think the government needs to do that now, because when you give families that support when they need it, you'll find that those children grow up into being great assets to the British economy in the future. It's not their fault, they didn't ask to be born, they need the support of all of our community.
OK, Angela Rayner in central London, thank you. You're watching Sky News. Coming up.
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. Another one bites the dust. Alan Pardew becomes the 10th Premier League manager to leave his job this season. And we'll have the best of the action from today's championship matches.
At least 7 police officers have been killed during an operation inside a prison in Mexico. Officers entered the detention centre in Veracruz to relocate some highly dangerous inmates. They were met by prisoners who had seized carpentry tools and set mattresses on fire. A memorial has been held in Kenya for the world's last male northern white rhino who died last month. Kenyan officials attended the event at the conservation reserve where Sudan was guarded. The 45-year-old rhino was put to sleep after age-related complications worsened. Sudan's death leaves only 2 females of the subspecies alive in the world.
It means a shame to us youths, because all of us are made facilitated to that. And I always say we all blame poachers for killing our animals, but we never blame ourselves for not doing anything when they are doing that. How did it happen, and what part did I take? What am I doing to make sure another species do not go extinct?
The Chinese space station stopped working more than 2 years ago as it re-entered the Earth's atmosphere. According to Chinese officials, the vehicle broke apart and mostly burned up before falling into the South Pacific. The 8-ton Chang'e 1 was sent into orbit in 2011 to carry out government development experiments. Primary schools in Finland are trialling a new kind of language teacher, alias the robot. The language teaching machine can understand and speak 23 languages, recognize people's skill levels and adjust expressions accordingly. Teachers hope that it will help motivate children.
I think the new curriculum, the main idea is to get the kids involved and get them motivated and get them, make them active. And I see Elias as one of the tools to, get different kind of practice and different kind of activities into the classroom. So in that sense, I think robots and coding the robots and working with them is definitely something that is according to the new curriculum and something that we teachers need to be open-minded about.
Welcome back. Let's cross over now to the Sky Sports News studio for an update.
Thanks, Rebecca. Hi, everyone. Leicester assistant manager Michael Appleton is the early favourite to become the new West Brom boss. The Premier League's bottom side, a party company with Alan Pardew. West Brom have lost their last 8 games and are 10 points away from safety with only 6 games left this season. Pardew's the 10th Premier League manager to lose his job this season. He only took charge 4 months ago following the sacking of Tony Pulis. In the Championship, Derby have moved a step closer to securing a place in the playoffs. They beat Preston 1-0. Tom Lawrence with this free kick, the scorer. The victory ends a run of 8 games without a win. Derby stay 5th, Preston are 10th. Middlesbrough are just behind Derby. Brit Assombalonga scored a 90th minute equaliser at Burton to rescue a point for Borough. They stay 6th, Burton remain bottom, 5 points from safety. Burton are level on points with Sunderland now, though. They lost 3-1 at home to Sheffield Wednesday. Locals jowl with Wednesday's first. Elsewhere, Bristol City remain just outside the top 6 after losing at home to Brentford. Millwall are also a point outside the playoff places after a 2-2 draw at Ipswich. Queen's Park Rangers enjoyed their biggest win of the season, thrashing Norwich 4-1, while second place Cardiff face Sheffield United tonight, live on Sky Sports 4. In the Super League, top of the table, St Helens made it 8 wins out of 9 games this season. They beat Widnes 28-6. This was the second of 2 first-half tries from Mark Percival. Wigan in second beat Hull KR 42-6. Reigning champions Leeds got their first win in 3 matches. They beat Salford 20-0. Josh Walters went over with the third of their 3 tries. Wins 2 for Hull, FC and Warrington. In the late kick-off, Catalan Dragons are playing Huddersfield. Bottom of the table, Dragons lead 20 points to 6. Benjamin Julian scored the first of their 3 second-half tries. About 15 minutes left in that one. England's cricketers have given themselves a good chance of winning the second test against New Zealand and squaring the series. England declared this morning on 352. That gave them a second innings lead of 381. Captain Joe Root and David Malan both made half-centuries. New Zealand started their second innings well, 42 without loss before the players went off a bad light. The hosts are still 339 runs behind, but do have all 10 wickets left going into the final day. Australia are heading for a heavy defeat in the 4th and deciding test against South Africa in Johannesburg. Home side declared on 3-4-4 for 6 on day 4. Faf du Plessis made 120. That left Australia chasing a massive 612 runs to win. Australia closed on 88 for 3. They need to win the match to square the series. There's more live now on Sky Sports News. We're back later.
Now coming up on Sky News at 7, we'll find out what exactly happens to plastic recycling. That's in our documentary coming up called Dirty Business.
astonishing. I never thought we would see this. I've been sitting here doing nothing.
True. It's been here for months already.
Months?
Yeah, months.
People have put this in their recycling bins. They thought it was going to be recycled, and yet it's just stuck in this logjam. What they actually gave you from the UK was a mix of who knows what.
I'm not supposed to getting this. No one wants it.
There was high hopes for this. It was going to be recycled. It was going to have a new life. Now, because it's been shipped like this, it's just landfill fodder.
Yeah, and then provide a solution.
We've never consumed so much, and a lot of it is plastic. We produce 20 times more plastic today than we did 50 years ago. I want to find out what happens to it all. Where does it go? And how much of it actually gets recycled? What I discovered was a system that pushes the problem off our shores. The end result? Plastic piling up, and it isn't going away. It all starts here, at home. Like a lot of families, we produce our fair share of waste.
I think we're a bit different when it comes to recycling. I think I'm a good recycler. But what do you think?
I think you don't look at what needs to go in recycling.
2/3 of us admit to being confused about what can and can't be recycled.
So in this one, we've got the plastic, bottles and tins.
Bottles, that's recyclable. Plastic, presumably that's recyclable.
See, that's you.
What's wrong with that?
Food in it.
People talk about washing it, but I'm just not sure whether you need to do that. I just get it, finish with it. As soon as they're finished with it, I just bung it in the bin. Done. This isn't recyclable.
No, that'd be you.
Film, but it's plastic.
No, but that's the outer one, that's your inner one.
So this shouldn't be in that bin. Did you put it in?
Of course not.
But I genuinely do find the whole thing very confusing. And I'm not convinced that it's actually worth doing. So why is it up to me?
I want to know more, so I'm hitching a ride with the guys who collect my own recycling bin. There are 450 councils with varying collection schemes and differing rules about what can and can't be recycled. If you don't get it right, it won't be collected.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So take me through whether this is a good bin or not.
Yeah, I'll have a quick look for you. That's looking very good at the moment.
And this is how you want to see it?
That's how we want to see it, yeah.
So the more things are sorted, the easier like this.
It is for us, yeah.
Might as well carry on then.
That's a very, very good bin again. Cardboard, right. Plastic, big cardboard, cartons, everything, that's spot on.
Good.
This is going to get telling off because we've got cardboard with glass. That's a no-no. So these are going to get telling off. Putting this label in there.
What are you like with your recycling?
No, mine's spot on.
So
So you wash your yoghurt pots out and you sort your glass from your plastic?
Well, my missus does.
Yeah.
Yoghurt pots, baked bean tins, wash out. If not, they're smelling all the time. The bins are.
What's the best aspect of this job?
Knocking off. Knocking off. That's brilliant. Once the last bit go on, you think, oh, time.
The day's collection ends here, my local depot. It's then picked up and hauled off to a sorting plant. And there's lots of it. In just 1 year, British households throw 22 million tonnes of waste into the bin. EU targets demand that we recycle half of that by 2020. But rates are stagnating at just 44%.
I started doing this job in January. It opened my eyes to recycling. When I come to places like these, you see how much can actually go into a lorry. It's very, very distressing in some cases. We might load up 20 tonne today. You think 20 tonne? That might be over a day or two.
But if you thought all of that plastic ended up being recycled, then you're in for a big shock. All this plastic might get collected, but it doesn't mean it'll get another life.
We know that we used to recycle very little indeed. We know that if you take some products, you are recycling probably 40 or 50% of what goes into the marketplace. But we know on other things that we're actually recycling practically nothing.
On a global scale, the numbers are staggering.
78 million tons of plastic packaging get produced every year. And then after very often a very short use, just 14% of the plastic packaging gets collected for recycling, and even less of that, just 2% gets recycled at high quality into new packaging. Then another 14% gets burned after use, another 40% gets landfilled, and a quite staggering 1/3 of all plastic packaging ends up polluting the environment.
I found it astonishing that around the world, only 2% of our plastic packaging gets recycled. I wanted to see what happened with my plastic.
When I was in my kitchen the other day, my children eating their yoghurt pots, as we do a lot. From time to time, those yoghurt pots end up in here, right? Absolutely. Absolutely. Those yoghurt pots end up here, along with about 60,000 tonnes of other people's yoghurt pots during the course of a year.
By the time my recycling's landed here, it's travelled nearly 200 miles and gone through countless hands. It's an industry that employs nearly 20,000 workers.
We take in material from people's bins and we turn it back into resources. By the time the waste that's behind you leaves here, it's actually quite a valuable commodity. Explain what the market is like for plastic at the moment. The market for plastic is fairly volatile, but it's fairly strong. It's all resources. All of this is resources, and I don't want to waste a bit. We want to turn those into the maximum value for the market we possibly can.
It turns out that a lot of our plastic doesn't get processed here. It's exported overseas. And one country has taken more of it than any other: China.
We live in a commercial world. is no different to any other material. It will go wherever the market demand is. It will go to the highest bidder. China has been an important market for the export of plastics from the UK.
China imports 10 million tons of plastic. They don't do it just to give plastic a good home. They do it because they need it to feed the manufacturing process. It's a value commodity. It's a resource that gets used to produce products. It's not a way of disposing of material.
But as China's appetite for plastic scrap increased, a big problem started to develop. Whole villages grew dedicated to sorting through the world's filthy plastic. One man documented what he found.
然后我捡起每一块垃圾就开始分辨。哦，这块垃圾来自于英国，这块垃圾来自于德国，这块垃圾来自于日本，上面有文字可以看得出来。那么多的垃圾，没有一块垃圾是中国的。所以当时我有一个非常直观的印象，就是中国简直沦为了一个世界的垃圾场，这是我非常大的一个感受。我们整个垃圾的去向，我们有权利知道我们的垃圾去了哪儿，它是怎么被处理的，是否意味着环境友好。即便离开了中国，它一定会在地球另一个角落上演。
It was a wake-up call for China, who saw this as a big problem they had to deal with. Their reaction would send shockwaves around the world. I'm trying to find out what happens to all our recycling. It's a journey that's taken me thousands of miles to the other side of the world. Hong Kong is the world's gateway to China. It's through this artery that much of the world's plastic scrap passes on its way to be processed on the mainland. In July 2017, China rocked the recycling world by announcing it would impose tough restrictions on the import of foreign waste. They called it National Sword.
We've become more and more conscious of waste. We've seen a lot more publicity, more and more people know that they want to recycle, and that they get very frustrated when they can't. But they don't know where it goes. There's always this assumption that it will be being reprocessed and made into good things in the UK, but frequently it's not. Because it's easier and in many ways cheaper to put it into a container and send it through Hong Kong into China.
That's the decision of let's pass it on to someone else and then worry about it.
From a business point of view, you say, well, why not? Government equally is moving the problem away. It's still achieving our recycling targets that have been set, but maybe at somebody else's expense.
Just try and sum up to me what our policy in the UK has been regarding China.
Cheap, easy solution, let's put it in a container in Felixstowe and wave bye-bye. But China is saying, and has been for a little while, why are we receiving your mixed rubbish? All sorts of things have been smuggled in there, being hidden. So they became more and more strict under a program called National Sword.
China's message was brutally clear. Any dirty, contaminated plastic would be flatly rejected. The kind of plastic Britain's been sending China for decades.
We export about 60% of the packaging plastic waste that we collect. And of that 2/3 that we export, about a third, 40% of that goes to China. Operation National Sword had big impact in that it's almost halved the amount of plastic going to China. That's the problem that we've now got with China. They're now saying, actually, we don't want this low quality stuff anymore. So we're going to close our doors and you're going to have to find somewhere else.
Finding somewhere else for the plastic is proving very difficult. I've come to meet Tony Wong. He's been trading plastic for 20 years, and he has a lot of it sitting in this yard in Hong Kong. Because China won't take it.
Right, okay. So this is full of varying amounts of plastic.
It is. It's about a value of over $10,000. Right. But now because stuck in here and the market changed because of the importing, maybe $7,000, 30% down.
So stuff that's been
washed
and clean, and this is good stuff for you?
Nothing wrong with this. Nothing wrong at all. Look at this.
Yeah.
Even no smell. It's clean. Material.
Yeah. And I can see you're very passionate about this stuff.
Yeah, but I see the money. I see the business. To me, not like solid gold, but it's a gold right here. Yeah.
Right, who would have thought it?
Yeah. It's very standard kind of item for us.
You just need a country that's willing to take it.
Of course, yes.
And that's the problem.
Yes, to put home for them, to turn back into value.
This is now the world's bottleneck for plastic scrap. Tons of it stuck in limbo. The big question now, where's it all going to go? Meet the man who's made his fortune in recycling. Steve Wong works with Tony to import tens of thousands of tons of plastic through Hong Kong to be processed in China.
So all of these plastic film bags have come over on a container from the United Kingdom to here to your place. Originally, these would have processed in China. They're not interested in it when it's like this.
But China's ban means Steve has to ship his plastic somewhere else. He's looking to neighbouring countries in which to process China's unwanted plastic. He's heading to Thailand, and I'm going with him.
Is it overstating it to say that the survival of your business rests on this surge?
There's no choice, because when the doors shut, you're not allowed to import anything anymore. The only solution is you go out of the country to continue our business.
Over several days I followed Steve from site to site. He's running out of time to find a place which is capable of dealing with the plastic he wants to recycle.
Very important that I need to come myself to experience, to feel about it.
The big question here is whether Thailand can cope with what China is rejecting. What we saw at one processing plant put all that in doubt. Here we found recycling from the UK, sitting, we were told, for more than a year. Then, more disturbing, biohazard bags. Being melted down to be turned into anything from children's toys to household appliances.
I'm looking for a place like more decent than this place. The place is quite messy. There's water everywhere. And also the production quite low. You see lots of broken machine. See workers don't really work professionally.
What struck me was the bags and bags of, non-recyclable waste. Some of it was clearly from the UK. That was just going to sit there for however long. Is that a sign of what can get through the system, what can slip through the net?
I think this is why China stopped importation of plastic scrap, because the exporters, they thought that they can put anything in the container and China can recycle. We also don't want to see the same thing happen to Thailand.
The ban on importing recycled plastics into China can be a great opportunity for the UK. It forces the UK to rethink how they deal with their plastics post-use. It can also go the bad way, where we would continue exporting the plastics far abroad, where the infrastructure is even worse than in China, and where we perhaps believe it gets recycled because we have collected and sorted it and sent it there. But actually, what happens there is it perhaps gets burned or it gets treated in a way that's negative for the local environment.
I wanted to know how Britain would cope if we have to deal with our own plastic instead of sending it abroad. What's going to happen when China closes the door? It wasn't going to be good news. spent months investigating what happens to our recycling. Of all the plastic we've been sending abroad all these years, a staggering 60% of exports have been going to one place, China. Problem is, they don't want it anymore. I've come to one of the biggest plastic processors in Britain to find out why we've been sending so much material abroad, and where all this plastic's going to go now.
PET is in the region of £200 a tonne. That's carbonated drinks and water bottles. Milk bottles, detergent bottles, they're about £300 a tonne.
Why are you exporting it? Why can't we just deal with it here in the UK?
The restrictions in the UK is capacity. Historically, there hasn't been a growth that matches the recovery of the materials from the waste management authorities and the local authorities. The capacity doesn't meet the demand. We're not a big island. We've got a small amount of land mass. Where do we put this material? I think it's a failing in the system. It's easier to put it in a container and export it rather than spend significant amounts of money putting it in a processing plant. It's well known that there is a poor auditing system for materials that go overseas to China or Asia particularly. It's generally out of sight, out of mind. We'd rather not know what's happening to it, as long as it's not on our back door.
The truth of the matter is that we will have no idea at all whether this gets a new life, actually properly recycled.
No, we don't. We don't know whether it's burnt, buried, or just left on the side of the street.
So we don't have enough processors to deal with all our plastic. But there's another reason we've been pushing our waste abroad all these years. The Packaging Recovery Note, or PRN, is a government subsidy designed to encourage recycling. Let's take a tonne of plastic scrap. A UK recycler processes that plastic, and because of contaminants like labels, glues or liquids, might only get half a tonne of recycled plastic from it. They would earn half a subsidy, or half a PRN. However, an exporter can take that tonne of plastic scrap, contaminants and all, and ship it off to be recycled abroad. That tonne of scrap is counted as fully recycled, and the full PRN subsidy is earned. But no checks are made as to how much recycled plastic is actually produced, and so it encourages export.
The PRN system was designed to subsidise the recycler, to help him confidence to invest in more equipment that will recycle more material, that will then grow the infrastructure in the UK. But unfortunately, the system was designed that it was weighted towards the exporter. So that whole bale would be eligible for a PRN, whereas us as a recycler, we're only eligible for what we separate and reprocess. The weight for the exporter is much more attractive than that of the recycler.
So once it goes in this container, the whole container gets issued with that evidence note.
Correct.
Whereas if you have to deal with it in the UK, it might only be like 40, 50% if you're lucky.
Correct.
So the incentive is to bung it in a container and send it away. Still get the credit for it, in fact for all of it, rather than deal with it here in the UK.
Correct, correct. We're not getting the full value of that subsidy, whereas the exporter is getting the full value by weight.
It seemed to me that the ban imposed by China could actually be an opportunity for British business. Javed Mauji set up his own plastic processing business in 2014. He tried to do the right thing by recycling here in the UK.
How would you describe how Britain's recycling industry, what state do you think it is in?
It's absolutely terrible. I mean, it's a mishmash. It doesn't work properly, and it's the whole structure of the British recycling sector at the moment seems to be focused on export to waste, don't process it here, because there's no incentive to process anything here. There's an incentive export.
When it launched, Javed's company Ecotech was doing well. success was short-lived. He just couldn't compete with the exporters.
How does it feel coming back to it?
That's pretty unpleasant. So, I mean, I have been back here for a couple of months, went into administration. It's a very, very painful process. Not only financially, but also in terms of lost jobs, and also in terms of lost capacity for the UK recycling business. So we as a UK company, we would get a PRN on what actually came out the other end. So whereas if you were exporting, you would get the PRN on the entire value.
So if you export plastic bottles, on the records you've recycled all of them.
That's correct.
But not necessarily all of them were recycled.
That's exactly it.
But it had absolutely no bearing on the figure that was jotted down in the book.
Well, I think that the reality is that the UK recycling rates are exaggerated by the PRN system.
So you, in a way, would say that you were a victim of that system?
Absolutely, yeah.
And so what is the incentive from the government to get rid of a system which is favourable to our recycling rates?
Well, it looks like we're recycling far more than we are.
It's a problem. What that system does, not only does it mean we're over-reporting recycling, we're actually undermining the competitiveness of our own domestic plastic reprocessors. We're actually exporting value. We could be reprocessing that material here. We had better quality material if we were making sure that we were accounting for the recycling properly. We would not have this competitive disadvantage for our domestic reprocessors vis-à-vis those overseas.
It is a serious flaw that we don't know well enough what happens to quite a bit of the recycling. We export a lot of plastic to be recycled. I myself think that we should have a system where we are much more likely to use that at home, because you know where it's gone. If you export it, and it's increasingly difficult to do that, Chinese are increasingly not accepting it, you don't always know where it's gone.
This is where it's gone. I was about to discover what happens when the recycling system fails. There are thousands of tons of plastic scrap lying in this yard, shipped from the UK in containers.
Tons and tons of plastic sitting in a yard on the outskirts of Hong Kong, doing nothing.
It's been here for months already.
Months?
Yeah, months. I haven't go to the site to look at the material. He sent me the photos, which of course not like this.
What were you expecting?
We're expecting only bottles.
And what did you actually get in the end?
Film, rigid plastics, and even some paper in here. No one willing to handle it. Okay, no one willing because it's labor intensive.
No one wants this stuff?
No one wants it.
It's just landfill fodder.
Yeah, that's not a solution.
It was an extraordinary sight. This recycling had been collected and then shipped, just like the system encouraged. Now it had been left to rot.
How do you feel about the person who shipped this to you?
Oh, upset. Totally upset.
Then we found bags from Chelmsford Council in Essex, and I realised that this plastic had travelled nearly 6,000 miles.
At least 7 police officers have been killed during an operation inside a prison in Mexico. Officers entered the detention centre in Veracruz to relocate some highly dangerous inmates. They were met by prisoners who had seized carpentry tools and set mattresses on fire. A memorial has been held in Kenya for the world's last male northern white rhino who died last month. Kenyan officials attended the event at the conservation reserve where Sudan was guarded. The 45-year-old rhino was put to sleep after age-related complications worsened. Sudan's death leaves only 2 females of the subspecies alive in the world.
To me, it's a shame to us humans, because all of us are very facilitated to that. And I always say we all blame poachers for killing our animals, but we never blame ourselves for not doing anything when they are doing that. How did it happen? What part did I take? What am I doing to ensure other species don't want to go extinct?
Chinese space station stopped working more than 2 years ago to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. According to Chinese officials, the vehicle broke apart and mostly burned up before falling into the South Pacific. The 8-ton Chang'e-1 was sent into orbit in 2011 to carry out rocket performance experiments. Primary schools in Finland are trialling a new kind of language teacher. It's a robot. The language teacher machine. Skill levels and test expressions. Accordingly, teachers will help motivate children.
I think the new curriculum, the main idea is to get the kids involved and get them motivated and get them, make them active. And I see Elias as one of the tools to, get different kind of practice and different kind of activities into the classroom. So in that sense, I think robots and coding the robots and working with them is definitely something that is according to the new curriculum and something that we teachers need to be open-minded about.
British homes sits in Hong Kong, destined for landfill. It's a shocking sight, and disheartening to think that people had taken the time to sort it, thinking they were doing the right thing. Amongst it all, we found household recycling bags from Chelmsford Council in Essex. So I went to Chelmsford Council to see what they know about where their recycling goes and what's ultimately done with it.
We collect more plastics here in Chelmsford than what a lot of the neighbouring authorities do. These are our collection system bags. We allow about 3.5 per week to the resident, which we deliver free of charge once a year. We put a lot of trust in the people that take away, obviously, our material.
I went to Hong Kong 2 weeks ago. I find a yard like this. This arrow is a pack of recycling from the UK. Unfortunately, that comes from Chelmsford Council. It was not to the quality that the receiving end wanted, and so it was rejected. And the unfortunate fact is that you can never tell where your material is going.
I think that will be absolutely investigated. There's no way we can be happy about that.
No, we're very concerned.
From what you've just highlighted, something has gone wrong down the road, which obviously raises a huge question for us, doesn't it really? One that will be, as you say,
will be thoroughly investigated.
And
once we find out the detail behind it, we will take steps to, we'll take whatever steps are needed to resolve in the future.
We don't want the idea that our material is ending up in a landfill site on foreign lands or in a yard somewhere. We want to make sure that material is being recycled as we've explained to our residents.
Then I received a package sent anonymously. Photographs of plastic packaging from the UK, destined for recycling, but now it appeared left sitting on a site in Poland. It looked like another case in which the system had gone badly wrong. I wanted to know more, so I headed to Poland and took along an expert on plastic packaging to take a look.
I've worked in the waste industry for 20 years and I've been involved in packaging waste for the last 15. So bales of plastic is quite a common sight.
This yard is owned by a British plastics exporter, the same exporter whose plastic we found in Hong Kong. It's a mix of bottles, tubs, food trays and film, all piled up in bales.
Oh, this is carrier bags. Look at the...
Wow.
These are beyond recycling. This is
starting to...
degraded.
Wow.
First thing is it's degraded to such a level it's not survivable. Anything that's held stored on site will be held in a state of disposal and therefore landfill. And that could be crime and could be prosecution if it's taken again. To me it looks like its inevitable destination is a landfill site. It looks like curbside recycling. Certainly there's carrier bags there that the local council that show that the householders want the effort of putting all their plastic waste into a bag.
This is Chelmsford Council. It's not the first time I've seen a Chelmsford Council bag include these.
These are mixed waste bales.
What's that mean?
What it means is it's cardboard, metals, plastic all mixed together, and if they've come from the UK, and certainly with some of the containers in here it looks like they're from the UK, they shouldn't be exported.
What is the chance that this was brought here to be recycled?
Because of the high amount of cardboard in it and it's being stored outside, there's no chance of this being recycled.
Plastic scrap shipped from the UK can earn a packaging recovery note, or PRN. That's the evidence note to say something's been recycled, but no one checks to see if it's actually been recycled, and incredibly, it counts as recycled towards our EU target. The exporter gets paid, no matter what.
I mean, you could say that the whole package recovery note system for exporters is just like money for nothing, license to print money.
You could say that, but the intention of the system was that the money from PRNs would go back into increasing infrastructure.
But it looks like in some cases it may not be.
I think the system's got that inherent risk in it. When things are transported across countries, across boundaries, it's very difficult to keep track of. The amount of, and I'll call it pure waste that is lying on the ground, the films that have degraded, the carrier bags that are flaking into nothing. And it's highly unlikely those are going to be recycled. So effectively, they've been brought here to be landfilled, to be disposed of.
We found more evidence of plastic from Britain ending up overseas, and some of it was so badly decayed that landfill was the only option. We contacted Chelmsford Council again to tell them we'd seen more of their recycling in Poland. After looking into it, Chelmsford confirmed that the plastic we'd found in Hong Kong and Poland had gone through companies accredited as reprocessors and exporters of packaging waste from the Environment Agency. They said they remain confident their approach has the least environmental impact of all recycling practices. The reason why Britain has been sending so much plastic overseas is that the PRN system actively encouraged it. Among those who are critical of the scheme is the man who came up with the idea in the first place, former Environment Minister John Gunn, now Lord Dean.
There are several problems with it. First of all, I don't think we have sufficient control over where it goes. Secondly, I don't think we have sufficient control over the quality of what is in there. In other words, you can have mixed up in that material things that are not going to be recycled. And the third thing is China is now from the 1st of January not to accept it. I think we ought to be recycling it here and in the rest of Europe.
But the problem, as you well know, is the problem with the PRN or the PERN system is it incentivises export.
It does. In certain circumstances, not all, but most circumstances, you are incentivised to export it. That's nonsense and shouldn't happen, and we should change it.
In 2015, DEFRA commissioned a series of independent briefing notes looking at the PRN scheme. We've obtained them. They raised concerns about the system. The briefing notes warned that competition is insufficient and there's a lack of transparency, and that local councils saw little if any benefit from the money raised. The system was seen to favour export, with low quality waste providing a cheap disposal route for contaminants. And worryingly, the paper's repeated concerns that the PRN scheme doesn't work to encourage investment in the UK reprocessing industry. But these briefing notes were never made public, and no changes were made to the PRN system. In June, Michael Gove was appointed Environment Secretary and walked straight into a crisis. A month later, China said they'd ban imports at the start of 2018. A committee of MPs wanted to know what the new Environment Secretary was going to do about it.
China has notified the WTO that it's going to stop importing plastic waste and any sort of paper.
Yes.
What impact do you think this will have on the UK's waste economy, and what preparations are you making?
I don't know what impact it will have. It's a very good question, and something to which I'll be completely honest, I have not given sufficient thought.
Okay, reassuring.
I want to firstly just go back to November, to that Environmental Audit Committee, where they were talking about the impact of the ban that China was intending to impose on plastic imports. And you'll remember you said that you hadn't given it much thought. Given that British business, British processors believe that this is huge, do you regret that?
Yes, it's a significant issue. I hadn't given it enough thought. But what we're doing now is everything we can in order to ensure that we turn what is a challenge into an opportunity. We've been exporting too much waste. What we need to do is to make sure that we reduce the amount that we produce and also process more of it at home.
Do you think that we have the capacity now to deal with the plastic that would have otherwise gone to China?
Naturally, the fact that China is going to close its doors to a significant amount of that plastic puts an additional challenge on us here in the UK.
I want to talk about capacity because I want to spend the next minute of this interview just showing you some footage that we filmed in Poland and in Hong Kong. It shows tens of thousands of tons of plastic on yards that has been abandoned.
Explained that we plan to implement. With the PRN scheme at the moment, while it has significantly improved recycling rates, and recycling rates have grown over the course of the last 20 years, it's still not good enough.
Then the government revealed its long-awaited 25-year plan for the environment. In that plan, the government provided no details of any proposed changes to the PRN scheme.
We're probably deluding ourselves. We think we have a system that's better than it is. And actually, if it isn't a very good system, well, we should improve it.
Recycling should be modern and close to home, but it must be recognised that helping the environment does come at a cost. The cheap way is let's dump it somewhere else.
I don't think we're planning quick enough, and I think it needs investment, I think it needs government support, and I think we need facilities such as these to accept that volume of material. We have to look at reprocessing it domestically. It's our waste, our problem, we should be recycling it.
When I first started this journey, I had no idea where our recycling ended up. But I found it, scattered thousands of miles across the globe, abandoned in yards from Eastern Europe to Asia, out of sight, out of mind. What I learned was that until we as a nation take responsibility for what we put in our bins, create a system we can trust, this problem's going to pile up, and we can't afford to ignore it.